Please join me in our invocation. Our God is bringing us to a good land with flowing streams, valleys, and hills, wheat and barley, olive trees and honey. We will eat our fill and bless the Lord our God, who has given us all good gifts. Please be seated. And welcome. It is good to be together on the eve of this national holiday that is focused on gratitude. As we continue to come out of the pandemic, as we continue to grieve our losses, we also are coming with joy to be together, to be comforted, and to celebrate. Welcome. A reading from the book of Deuteronomy. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with flowing streams, with springs and underground waters welling up in the valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you may eat bread without scarcity, where you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron, and from whose hills you may mine copper. You shall eat your fill and bless the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. Take care that you do not forget the Lord your God by failing to keep his commandments, his ordinances, and his statutes, which I am commanding you today. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then do not exalt yourself, forgetting that the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness, an arid wasteland with poisonous snakes and scorpions. He made water flow for you from flint rock and fed you in the wilderness with manna that your ancestors did not know, to humble you and to test you, and in the end, to do you good. Do not say to yourself, my power and the might of my own hand have gained me this wealth. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, so that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your ancestors, as he is doing today. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Good evening. A reading from the 17th chapter of Luke. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? But the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." The word of the Lord. I'm wondering this evening if anyone here knows who Mary Berry is. Mary Berry, raise your hand. Mary Berry, as many of you know, is a renowned British chef and food writer. She's best known as the host of a show called Mary Berry Cooks, which is shown here in the U.S., mostly on PBS. If you go to the UK, you soon discover that Mary Berry's picture and her books are literally everywhere. Her visage is on the side of double-decker buses. She's everywhere in the tube station on placards and signs. And if you're walking down the high street in the typical village or town in England, her books will be front and center in the window because they sell the best. I share this with you because tomorrow PBS will be airing, this is a commercial, a show called A Mary Berry Thanksgiving, which was obviously produced for the American market because the only people, I shouldn't say the only people, but most of the people who celebrate Thanksgiving in the UK are Americans. There are about 200,000 Americans who live in the UK. And of course, there are Canadians as well. They celebrate their own distinct version of Thanksgiving on the second Monday of October every year. Anyway, my future British son-in-law will be joining my extended family in Kansas City tomorrow to experience his first American Thanksgiving. And I'm interested to see his reactions to what's on the menu. Think about it if you're not from the United States and you're confronted with sweet potato casserole. What is it? Is it dessert? It's got marshmallows on top. Stuffing. What is it? And where has it been stuffed? Pumpkin pie, you mean you eat gourds? And cranberry sauce. What is a cranberry and how do you make sauce out of it? These, of course, are not staples of the typical British diet, and we anticipate that humor is likely to ensue. I want you to think about these things in terms of something that a writer named David Henson, a Greek Orthodox Christian, wrote a number of years ago. He was comparing our American Thanksgiving traditions with communion, and specifically the great prayer of Thanksgiving that we liturgical Christians use when we celebrate communion or the Eucharist. And this is how he introduced it. He said, "I absolutely love feasts. Not so much the eating part, but the preparing part. He's the opposite of me. For the past 3 years," said Henson, "since becoming a stay-at-home dad, I've done most of the cooking, especially around the holidays, planning, preparing, cooking festive feasts. By now, our family has its own traditional dishes, without which the table would seem bare. I'm not so wild about these, you might like them. Garlicky kale with dried cranberries, or Swiss chard with golden raisins and pine nuts. Mashed potatoes, says Henson, always a different way each year. Green bean casserole, nothing from a can. Fresh orange cranberry relish. Mulled apple cider. Glazed Cornish hens instead of a full turkey. And a pumpkin bourbon cheesecake to complete the meal. And of course, wine and bread. Are you hungry yet? When I think about the meal, said Henson, and shop for the ingredients, I get a rush of nostalgic emotion and envision all of the past year's perfect feasts, forgetting, of course, the reality of it. It's difficult work, and nothing ever goes exactly right. But when I see the eyes of my family and friends widen in excitement, in hunger, in expectation, in anticipation, I feel deep within me, fed by something greater than food. When we pass the bread, pour the wine, make a toast, I see a feast and echoes of a feast that has little to do with food. In these moments, Thanksgiving becomes something more, like the Great Thanksgiving, or in Greek, the Eucharist. He continued, I'm sure there will be someone who complains about this holiday being one in which Americans overindulge in food and eat in excess, as they are wont to do. And I suppose there might be a valid criticism in that. There will undoubtedly be someone who calls us to remember that many, many people will be hungry on the day of feasts. There will also be someone who reminds us that this day of Thanksgiving has a shadow of the slaughter of Native Americans. And they should, because we should remember these things and hold that tension of sorrow with our elation of Thanksgiving. But Thanksgiving is also a day in which Americans remember to be thankful. And this is no small feat in a culture in which everything is not enough, in which the day after being so thankful, we slam ourselves into malls and forget what it means to be thankful. The Great Thanksgiving, too, is a moment in which Christians are reminded to be thankful, and that as well is no small feat. Says Henson, many progressive Christians fear being thankful for what they have is problematic because it has echoes of the prosperity gospel in which God's favored find wealth in spite of what the gospel actually says. But I wonder, says Henson, what would happen if we let ourselves be genuinely thankful on Thanksgiving, thankful for the turkey that dried out, the Cornish hens that burned, the lumps in the mashed potatoes, the spilled wine on the floor, the heated argument, smoke alarms that erupt and wake up the toddler, the passing of bread over strained relationships, the extra glass of wine, the stack of dishes to do in the sink, that we ate too much while others ate too little, thankful for all that we have. And he concluded with these words, the reality of the feast is that being thankful in the midst of it can be difficult, because in the feast, in the coming together at the table, we are made human and messy. Before it, after it, and in the idea of it, thankfulness is simple. But in the midst of it, the setting of the table, the breaking of the bread, the sipping of wine, the Thanksgiving can be difficult. It's always the same, more or less, but also always different. more or less, and always so mundane, and, if we pay attention, also sublime. And if all else fails, pour another glass of wine. It's a feast after all, and the wine should never be wasted. Diana Butler Bass said something similar with these words. Think of how we depict Thanksgiving. People around a table eating a meal. In the United States, it is the romanticized image of our most primal gratitude myth. Europeans and indigenous people sharing around a table. Of course, it didn't really happen that way, but that's what myths are, stories that express something we desire, what we hope will be, and how we dream of happiness and peace. Thanksgiving serves to remind us of what we can celebrate together: food, the bounty of the earth, the gifts of life and work, the pleasure of relationships, the real unity of community, peace and interdependence, and a call to serve others as we have been served. We can start by celebrating the abundance of a beautiful and abundant land, a land with enough for all, with its vast geographies layered with histories, cultures, and the hard work of the diverse peoples who have inhabited this place. It can be a day marking humility, forgiveness, and appreciation. We come together around the Thanksgiving table, making sure there are enough chairs for all to be seated and sated. Says Bass, these things are worth celebrating. And so with these things in mind, I'll leave you this evening with this beautiful Thanksgiving prayer. God, there are many days we do not feel grateful. When we are anxious or angry, when we feel alone, when we do not understand what is happening in the world or with our neighbors, when the news is bleak and confusing, when there are threats, injustice, and war. We struggle to feel grateful. But this Thanksgiving, we choose gratitude. We choose to accept life as a gift from you and as a gift from the unfolding work of all creation. We choose to be grateful for the earth from which our food comes, for the water that gives life, and for the air we all breathe. We choose to thank our ancestors, those who came before us, for their stories and struggles. We receive their wisdom as a continuing gift for today. We choose to see our families and friends with new eyes, accepting them for who they are. We are thankful for our homes, whether humble or grand. We choose to appreciate and care for our neighbors, whatever our differences or how much we feel hurt or misunderstood by them. We choose to see the world as our shared commons, our home now, and the legacy we will leave the generations to come. God, this Thanksgiving, we do not just give thanks, we choose it. We will make this choice of thanks with courageous hearts, knowing that it's humbling to say thank you. We choose to open ourselves to your sacred generosity, aware that we live in an unending circle of gratitude. We all are guests at your hospitable table, around which gifts are passed and received. We will not let anything opposed to love take over this table. Instead, we embrace grace, unconditional love, the giftedness of life everywhere. In this choosing and in the making of this meal, we will pass gratitude on to the world. Thus, with you, with all those gathered at this table, and with those at tables far distant, we pledge to make thanks. We ask you to strengthen us in this resolve here, now, and into the future, around our family table, around the table of our nation, around the table of the earth. We choose thanks. Amen.
I invite you to join me in affirming our faith using a portion of the Confession of 1967. Life is a gift to be received with gratitude and a task to be pursued with courage. People are free to seek life within the purpose of God, to develop and protect the resources of nature for common welfare, to work for justice and peace in society, and in other ways to use their creative powers for the fulfillment of human life. Please be seated. There is an offering plate on the table. There are baskets for individual items, and bags are welcome to be put around the table as we invite you now to bring forward your gifts of food and funding, which will go to Hallie Q. Brown and to Neighborhood House. Please join me in our offertory prayer. We cannot begin to express our gratitude to you, giver of all, for your gifts poured into our lives, but let these offerings be used to bring hope, healing, and peace to all your children, so we may all give thanks to you forever. And let us continue to pray together the words that Jesus taught. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
So before we share our benediction, I'd like to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving, safe travels if you'll be traveling. Please join me. The God of laughter sends you out. The brother of the poor sends you out. The spirit of wonder sends you out. And amen.